Welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. Problem solvers have problems too. So here at Behind the Podium, I, Jared Cohen, and my co-host Alexander Ellis discuss the struggles, philosophies, demands, and practices of the coach, or said more broadly, health and wellness practitioner. To provide quality coaching is to enhance someone's life in an everlasting and unfolding way. This is not easy and requires a lot of due diligence and self-mastery on the part of the coach to be able to perform. So without further ado, join us as we dig deeper into the depths of the coach's mind. Welcome back, or welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. I am Jared Cohen with my partner in crime,
Alexandra Ellis.
And today we are going behind the podium with our first British guest. This guest of ours is a coach that stays hungry for all things related to optimizing health and the world of strength and conditioning. He is currently the gym manager at California Elite Training Center, head coach at CrossFit DCS, and is the media manager for the upcoming US Open Powerlifting Championships in this coming April, 2017. What I personally appreciate and admire about our guest is his continual interest in learning more and sharing that knowledge with those he works with. Without further ado, it is Alex's and my pleasure to welcome the founder of Barbell Inspired, Mr. Dan Roberts, to Behind the Podium.
Oh, hey. I guess that's me.
That is you, sir. What do you think? You feel like that's you? Does it sound like you?
Sounds about right.
All right. like looking in a mirror.
Yeah. I think people always comment on first is the British, because I guess that's slightly different to what most people encounter. There's not many British coaches out here in the US. So in San Diego. Kind
of bring out the contrast a little bit. I will. A little interesting tidbit is on your site, Barbell Inspired. It says a bespoke strength and conditioning. I don't know the exact thing, but commenting on this word bespoke, I was like, I'm not sure what that means, and so I looked it up, and I was like, oh, that's cool, like made to order, like individualized, and then I saw like in the sort of parentheticals, it was like chiefly British, and I was like, got it.
Yeah, that's where that comes from. So, yeah, a lot of things like that come up. Spelling and stuff like that, the way I spell things is very different. The use of the word whilst instead of while, things like that.
Yeah,
that's a good one though.
I worked with a woman who was born and raised in England, and the same thing. So when I was at the website, I was like, oh, he really is British. How fancy. Yeah. We're very easily impressed here in America.
Yeah, apparently. I too worked, because I went to overnight camp and worked at my overnight camp, and that was always filled with many international counselors and employees. And my last year there, I worked with a British fellow as well, and I always liked when he would tell me to go get things from the garage.
Yeah, right. Garage.
So,
anyway. I think too, it's interesting that you have the unique perspective of having done strength and conditioning here and in England. What would you say, if there is like the biggest difference?
I think the level of strength conditioning that I'm involved in here is certainly a lot more in depth than in the UK, and I wonder if that's maybe indicative, and that's a difference in itself. Over in the UK, there's definitely a lot of sports, and that's clear. Like from when the Olympics was there in 2012, there's like a big sporting following. But I feel like it's seen as something different to general health and fitness. Whereas here, I feel like they're more integrated in that people that get into health and fitness at a younger age, certainly in school, are encouraged more with like fellowship programs and scholarships and stuff based around like D1, D1, D2 level sports. And then the strength and conditioning coaching that applies to that as well is like there seems to be like a bigger field of that because of those collegiate sports, and then those being feeder leagues for professional sports as well. Whereas in the UK, there just didn't seem to be as much focus on that like sporting background with education, I guess, within schools anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting.
But then maybe it was just my school. I know a few other schools were similar as well, but I know certainly from personal experience, we at the start of the term, we were told to buy certain sports kit. Obviously, soccer's huge over there. Cricket as well, a game which lasts 5 or 6 days. Interesting.
Oh my gosh.
And we were told to buy like rugby, soccer, and cricket equipment. And then the next 4 years were pretty much followed by just hockey drills, which had nothing to do with cricket nor soccer or rugby. The rugby kit was never used. So yeah, it was interesting to come here and see that like sports is such a big deal in terms of school, and then obviously going through like collegiate sports as well. So I think there's a lot more link, to answer your question. There's a bigger link between health and fitness and sports, as opposed to the UK, where sports is one thing, and then health and fitness is getting people moving, and something very different in more commercial environments like LA Fitness and Globo Gym, stuff like that.
Right. Well, and I wonder too, because I feel like there is this heavy emphasis on sports in our schools, and yet to me it seems that kids here are so inactive and adults are so, just sedentary. Is it similar in the UK in that way, or are people just moving around more in general? No,
if anything, I'd say, well, I'm kind of biased in that I'm in California, so people are kind of up and about around.
Yeah, we're weird
because of the weather. I'm sure that other states where it is perhaps the weather reflects that of the UK, it's probably similar to the UK. Purely because of that weather impact, people tend to go out less and do like less outdoors, less outdoor activities. I'm painting a really bad picture, and that's, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen at all. People still in the summer, they go to the beach, they still play sports. But for the most part, I feel like the culture is less outdoorsy. There's no there's limited, certainly in the south of England, like mountain bike trails and rock climbing and stuff. It's very flat. No beach volleyball, for 6, 7, 8 months of the year because it's too rainy. So yeah, people tend to have a slightly more of like a couch lifestyle, I'd say. And then, as I say, if it is movement, it's in the gym. Like people will drive to a gym to stand on a treadmill and run, going nowhere, and then drive home, as opposed to going for a run, like around the local area. So yeah, it's much more sedentary based, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. I will say though, when I was in London last year, I was blown away at the just normal occurrence and integration of public transportation and also walking, in addition to the tube. And I actually felt like within just that time, the week I was there, I really saw a minimum of, or a really minimal amount of people that seemed overweight. And so at least maybe in London, where there is a lot of, movement from point A to point B, I also personally enjoyed that aspect of like just having this non-exercise mediated activity, to your point that like, it doesn't just have to be, I think sometimes, especially in the United States, we categorize everything. It's like, if I'm moving, that means I'm exercising, that there isn't just this ability to have movement as a part of my day that doesn't have to be the hour that I'm following my program.
Absolutely, yeah. And you're right, especially within like larger cities, public transport is a lot better there, a lot more improved. So yeah, within cities where it's so congested to try and drive, people will take the bus, then take the tube, then walk 500 yards to the next bus, take the bus from there,
right?
As opposed to like sitting in a car. So yeah, there's definitely that element of movement.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Prior to working in the fitness industry, you were managing 2 retail banks in the UK.
Correct.
So I'm curious to hear from you some of the background that has led up to where you are now, particularly bringing us up to speed. I know in the past 6 months you've been really immersed in the world of powerlifting, so giving us enough background to dovetail into where your head and body are at currently with those endeavors.
Absolutely. to make it like big picture, I went through probably 24 jobs when I was a lot younger. Couldn't find one that I liked, much to my parents' dismay. They really wanted me just to take a job and pay some bills and settle into life. And I just kept quitting jobs. Worked in a bank, managed 2 retail bank branches in the UK, and kind of was unhappy in the corporate world, seeing and dealing with people that came in and out all day long that had millions of dollars in their account, or millions of pounds, being in England, in their account, and still had no happiness. I kind of got fed up with the corporate world, went traveling around Southeast Asia a bit, and just saw that there's more to life than just sitting behind a desk. Kind of got into the gym, fell into the gym lifestyle, hired a personal trainer. At that point, had never used like a rowing machine or anything like that. And I remember very vividly like seeing this personal trainer like demonstrating how to use the Concept 2 rower. And I was like, this guy's cool. Like, he's in shape. People like look up to him. He's got good posture. Like, he's a good looking guy. I'm like, that's cool. That's a pretty cool job. So I kind of like did some research and thought about getting into that myself. Used my managerial experience to then get a job managing health clubs. So managed the Europe branch of LA Fitness Health Club over in London. Kind of whilst I did that, went through my personal training qualifications, and then so I did my level 2, then did my level 3, and whilst on my level 3 decided that I was enjoying it so much I'd actually quit my job there and then and stay on the actual course and do the level 4 and then go on to like obesity management and working with basically individuals who want to keep fit and healthy, who have like adaptive athletes and who may have contraindications with their health. So carried on, stayed on, did that, and then went straight into personal training after that in a personal training studio in London, which was shortly followed by CrossFit coaching, getting my level 1, 2, and then building up certifications through that. So it was basically, long story short, a journey from being in a corporate environment and thinking that there's probably more to life than sitting behind a desk, and discovering that I had a real passion for health and fitness and movement, and then wanting to share that with other people, and then trying to do that on the largest scale possible, which is what led me to group classes and CrossFit coaching.
That's awesome. And how what was that transition like from having the background of the personal training? I'm not sure the certification organization exactly, but that before going into CrossFit and sort of molding those two together, was there dissonance to that? Was that an easy transition?
I think it was a pretty easy transition, to be honest. I definitely benefited from having the background in anatomy and physiology that personal training provided going into the CrossFit certifications. Just understanding muscle agonists and lever lengths and stretch shortening cycles and all that kind of stuff really helped the how can I put this? I feel like the personal training was great theory, and then the actual CrossFit class was like the application of that knowledge. So I kind of had the information from it, and then I'd never really known how to apply that in the most effective way. And obviously with CrossFit from Greg, that application was just mind blowing. Like in a weekend, everything just kind of made sense. And I was like, oh, that's how we can use all this information we have and put it into practice. So yeah, I feel like it was a pretty easy transition.
And what's been going on lately with your powerlifting pursuits? How has that changed the game for you?
It's been interesting for sure. It's a different world, very different world, very similar but different also. I never really intended to like jump fully into powerlifting. When I was doing CrossFit and coaching CrossFit, I happened to attend a seminar a week before the CrossFit Games with Mark Bell and Mike Farr in CrossFit Long Beach. And a guy who was like relatively the same weight as me and a little bit shorter was just deadlifting 500 pounds for repetitions. And I was thinking,
wow,
how is that possible? I thought CrossFit athletes were the strongest people in the world, blah, blah. So yeah, it was kind of eye-opening to see this, and that kind of opened my eyes to like what is possible in terms of strength. And I really like the simplicity of, I say simplicity, they're incredibly complex lifts when you really get into like the technical aspects of how they're performed in the coaching. But with a deadlift, for example, people always say, like, you either lift or you don't. Like, there's a bar, and it's you versus the bar, and 1 month you can't lift it, and then 6 months later you can. That's just straight progress right there. So I really like the simplicity of that. So, yeah, I kind of just fell in love with the 3 main movements, squat, bench, deadlift, and, like, testing the limits and seeing what I could push with those. and also from a CrossFit perspective, I've never been a great CrossFit athlete, but my VO2 max is high. My resting heart rate was at 32 at one point, incredibly low, and I was able just to go and go and go in terms of cardiovascular work and muscular endurance, but my strength was always lacking. So I thought, well, if anything, this will just help my strength as an athlete in CrossFit. This will help drive some of those strength numbers up. And now, 7-8 months later, it's been pretty much powerlifting exclusively. Although I'm doing the CrossFit Open now, which is hurting the lungs for sure, having not done much metabolic conditioning for so long. But yeah, it's very, very different, as I say, in the sense that it's just the 3 lifts. But obviously the mechanics and the way the body works is pretty much the same.
Do you think do you have a different context now for coaching the average individual in a GPP sense based on having this greater immersion into one of these specific entities of GPP?
I would say so, yeah. But not necessarily purely as a result of powerlifting, just as a result of dedicating time to study any 3 lifts. For example, if you chose the muscle up, the handstand push up, and like a Turkish get up, and you studied those 3 movements exclusively for 6 months, your ability to coach those movements to someone just for GPP would be increased. Right. So it's not necessarily like, oh, powerlifting has helped me coach those things. It's like these 3 movements make more sense to me now, and I know more about them just from focusing on them. So yeah, it's definitely helped me in my coaching of the squat, the bench, and the deadlift to people for GPP purposes.
Yeah, that really, I love this idea, simplicity, and what it means to go deep into a few things versus spreading yourself too thin, both as a coach and as a learner, as an athlete. Alex and I did a recent episode on progression and the incremental learning process, and in that episode I was just kind of riffing, but then I mentioned this idea of like, how cool would it be if you started a new client with just the push-up and the deadlift, and it was like for a month that's all you did, but you introduced a lot of different variation based on, I'm going to do ring push-ups, I'm going to do weighted push-ups, I'm going to deadlift kettlebells, I'm going to deadlift a stone, et cetera, but the context of the main lift was the same. And I've just like continued to ponder that I feel like, wow, you could probably go so much deeper and develop principles for that athlete so much more robustly than I think the struggle that happens on a average basis with most people coming into CrossFit gyms, where it's just information overload, and then even 3 years in, they're like, wait, what's that again, and how does that work? What are your thoughts on sort of the balance of less is more versus having more tools to use with someone?
I think there's a lot to be said for I can never say this word, specificity. There's a lot to be said for that, in that obviously the more time you spend dedicated on something, the better you're going to get. And that doesn't necessarily have to mean exactly the same movement. Like you said, just because you're doing deadlift doesn't mean you can't do single leg deadlifts, kettlebell deadlifts, dumbbell deadlifts, all that kind of stuff. And that's actually going to, as they say in powerlifting, like build that base. It's going to build a wider foundation for you to build upon, whether that be strength or hypertrophy or endurance. And obviously it's going to help your technique, all these variations. That being said, as CrossFit has taught us, like the best thing for GPP, for general public, life fitness, if you will, staying fit for life, is a good combination of different movement patterns. There's a book by Katie Bowman called Move Your DNA, and it always stuck with me when I heard her on another podcast, where she was talking about just as your body needs different micronutrients and macronutrients, it also needs those in terms of movements. So she suggested, like, you'd walk in shoes for the day, then you'd walk barefoot for a day, then you'd walk in shoes on a sandy beach, then you'd walk barefoot on a stony beach, and all these different like forces and stuff going through your body and causing like different movement patterns and recruiting more stability and stuff like that are vital to your body in terms of building like a healthy body, I guess, building symmetries throughout the body. I think each have their place, and I certainly don't see any harm. And obviously, that's where periodization comes in going through those phases. Like you said, like doing an 8-week block of focusing on those two movements and the variations of them, and then another 8-week block of something else.
Right.
And obviously, depending on your client's goals, you can make that client specific, you can make that sport specific. You know, there's a reason why in the NFL Combine they do like the bench test, and they're testing their 40-yard time, and they're not necessarily, you know, testing their max snatch because it's not as specific to their sport. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned Katie Bowman, because I was thinking about that as we were talking, you know, at the beginning, that especially here in America, there's this idea that, you know, it has to be exercise. I have to be in my exercise equipment and I have to be at the gym. But the way Katie phrases it is like, you just move every day in every way, and that just becomes your normal. And similar with like, you know, deadlift and squat, when I'm practicing them in my own body, it's also trying to come up with that context of how it applies for your client. Because like, yeah, it's awesome that you can deadlift, but I want you to be able to do this so that you can pick up, you know, the 10 gallons of water off the ground at Costco when you go. You know, those practical applications are super important.
Yeah, completely agree. And even, again, to take it back to powerlifting, there's the two main stances in competition, the sumo deadlift and then the conventional deadlift. And it's not that one is any stronger than the other. As I've learned with all coaching, the answer is it depends. It's going to depend on like the individual, their lever lengths, their movement patterns, their mobility, especially in the hips. Some people that have super long arms and like a short torso and have the like good hip abduction might prefer a sumo deadlift, and that's going to be more optimal for them in terms of moving the greatest loads, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, many ways to approach the context, and that's what kind of makes me think about how at times maybe we're introducing too many variables that sort of overwhelms the ultimate understanding of how this is going to be best applied, or at least transferred elsewhere, when it's potentially information overload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I know you attended the CrossFit Kids specialty certification about 6 or 8 months ago. Have you been doing any CrossFit Kids or teen coaching, and what has that experience been like?
Yeah, I have been. They're a younger age group. We do 2 a week at CrossFit DCS. It's definitely a challenge. It's a great challenge. And it's not so much about coaching, like the movements as such. It's more about athlete engagement, purely because attention spans are obviously very different. Trying to keep it interesting and keep it fun and get their buy-in. And I guess that's a big one in itself, like getting their buy-in, getting them to understand and getting them to want it. I think a lot of the content on the CrossFit Kids course was actually super applicable to newcomers that walk into a CrossFit gym. I think a lot of that would be beneficial to be shared more.
Right.
Especially, as I say, like the motivation aspect of it, like the psychology of the movement, getting them to want it as well. Because an athlete can come in and say like, hey, I'm really interested in like getting in shape. Can you tell me more about like the zone diet, blah, blah, blah. And for me, I'll usually say, excellent, like let's start with a food diary. And 2 weeks later, they haven't started food diary. And
right.
You can only do so much as a coach. Like you have to, like a client has to show me that like they want it. Like I can only do so much and I can try and motivate them, but that has to be an intrinsic motivation for them to act. So to take it back to the CrossFit Kids, it's trying to help them see the importance of movement, help them see the importance of staying fit and staying healthy and staying active. And as we said, it doesn't necessarily have to be exercise, it's just general movement. So a lot of the time, as the curriculum suggests, it's just games. So we'll start with a game, and then we'll do a skill piece, and then we'll play another game, which is actually a workout. And then we'll have a workout, which, funnily enough, looks just like a game, and then we'll finish with an actual game, whatever that may be. So all the time they're moving, they're having fun. And yeah, it's definitely a challenge more with the age groups as well. There aren't any teens. The oldest we have is 11. But the age range is from 5 to 11.
Wow.
And there's a huge difference in those 6 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, coaching a 32-year-old and a 38-year-old, 6 years between them, not much difference.
Yeah,
but between a 5 and 11 is just developmentally is huge difference. So it's just trying to get their buy-in and not have them get too distracted and run off across the gym chasing. So, it's super cute. It's fun.
Is there anything that you feel really, really particular about when working with that younger age group, like making sure that they're doing something correctly, or they're getting this understanding? Or do you approach it more as like, you know, hey, they're kids, like, you know, as long as they're here and they're moving and they're paying attention, like that's a win for me?
Yeah. I think both of what you said is true for different elements of the class, both the physical and the mental. So what you said second about they're here, they're moving, I think that applies somewhat to the physical aspect of it. Is there anything in particular about it? Yeah, it would be that they don't need to be moving like large loads, like even kettlebell deadlifts. And they cover that on the curriculum on the CrossFit Kids course. They say that like, hey, they can start with an imaginary barbell and you can make it fun and it's pink and it's got rainbows on it and your barbell looks the best, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then they can progress to a whiteboard marker and they're holding a whiteboard marker for the press. And then they go to a PVC pipe. And then maybe after 2 years, they've progressed from the red pen to the blue pen to the black pen, which is all the same, but to them it's fun, to a PVC pipe and then eventually a barbell when they're maybe like 13, 14. They don't need to be moving loads at that age. Is just setting movement patterns, because when they're 14, between the age of 14 and 20, well, great, you've got 6 years to like perfect strength. Like 6 years, that's a long time to build and develop that strength, especially in a teen who's able to grow that strength. So yeah, I think, is there anything in particular about it? Yeah, it would be that they don't need to move too much in loads, and as long as they're there and having fun with the movement, that's fine. With regards to what you said the first time, I think the mental aspect of it, there's definitely something I like them to think about and take away, and that is not to have like which I see in a lot of kids when they come in to train, not to have like a fixed mindset, not to think that like, I'm not very good at burpees, so I don't enjoy burpees.
Right. Cool.
I'm not very good at push-ups, so I don't enjoy push-ups. As opposed to like, I'm not very good at push-ups, but over time I can improve if I practice it more. And it's something that we take for granted, and it's something that it's just a mindset that a child doesn't necessarily have. They don't understand that time spent on something improves the outcome, the output. So I really try and, whilst not getting too deep with a 6-7-year-old in conversation, try and help them understand that like, hey, there's potential for growth, both physically and mentally. If you apply yourself, you'll get better. Just participation is king. Just do your best, have fun with it. And the end result doesn't matter. It's the input that matters. Just giving 100% and you will get better. So yeah.
Nice.
Wow. That's so cool too. Cause I'm just thinking, you know, when I was growing up and I was in school, I hated for a period of time math, you know, and so many kids say that like, oh, I hate math. I can't do it. And they just want to like walk away. But I mean, as a banker, you can't just like not do math. Yeah. And my parents, I just remember my mom saying, you know, that's fine, but it's not going away. Like you need to spend the time, you need to dedicate the time so that you can get better. And so these lessons that you are teaching these kids, like that is so great that they are, you know, having the structure to be able to say like, hey, it's not that you're just going to be terrible at something or you can hate it forever. Like work at it, you'll get better. That's so great.
Yeah. And it's about finding a balance as well. Ultimately, like, it's funny, the child's mindset isn't too different to that of an adult. So in CrossFit, they say, like, work your weaknesses. Right. Well, that's exactly what we're saying effectively. Like, for these kids, like, you can get better, work your weaknesses. But for them, if they come in and they have 45 minutes of things that they're not very good at, they're not going to have fun. They're not going to leave having fun. Sometimes you just need to throw something that they're good at and they can just smash it out of the park and have a great time. And again, it's not so different for us. Work your weakness, but you've still got to occasionally throw in things that you're good at so you can enjoy the process at the same time, enjoy the journey.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that, I mean, it makes sense, but I'm thinking, you know, CrossFit Kids, there's like little 6-year-olds lifting barbells, but no. They don't need to be doing that. That learning, like, again, Katie Bowman, like learning how to move is a life skill that I don't feel enough children learn anymore in this country.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just basic movement patterns as well. Like, I think Kelly and Juliet Starrett have talked about it a lot when they're talking about posture of children and the things that have affected the first world in terms of movement negatively were the invention of the height, like the cushion running shoe, and the chair. The chair and the shoe have both between them like contributed to incorrect movement pattern in terms of running, and then a very lethargic posture in terms of sitting down. And I know that Juliet Starrett was pioneering and pushing forward and still is with stand-up kids, trying to get more like stand-up desks in schools and having them, well, they're seeing a lot of benefits from it, obviously, from the kids, like standing up, being more attentive and being more successful in their education, just from changing the way changing the environment and the position they're in when they learn.
Mm-hmm. I know. It took me till I was like out of college already to realize that, I learn better standing and I don't fall asleep. I wish I had known this when I was 6, and it would have saved me a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so much of changing the culture around it too, that like, I feel like, to your point, Alex, like, even though that knowledge would be empowering, I imagine it'd still be difficult to attend a class and have a teacher okay with you being the only one standing. So it's like some of those things that work against us, but obviously I love the idea of CrossFit Kids and other similar methodologies in which we're really trying to change the understanding, the context from a really early start to get bigger change going forward. And particularly what you were talking about, Dan, with this understanding of mindset, and that there can be an active choice, because I think for sure there's an epidemic with the way we conceptualize exercise, let alone, gym class, like, oh God, like I don't want to have to do a mile run because I'm not good at running, and just how much those things play off of one another. So to have a different understanding about actually being able to learn something, and that from a young age, this understanding that they're actually, like, physical is something that can be learned. It's not just something that you're born with, I think is a real game changer, because most kids, especially as they move into adolescence, it's all like a comparison game, and like, wow, he's taller than me, and he moves so much faster, and he gets picked first, to play kickball. So to have these early experiences where it's like, oh wow, I'm actually like learning that like eventually I can be picked first is really awesome.
Yeah, for sure, I agree.
As for your own practice, and as you continue to evolve your understandings within the world of health and fitness, is there anything recently that has really caused you to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, and maybe take a step back and question this previous understanding based on where you're currently at?
Yeah, I think specifically with, and it's not necessarily super recent, in the past maybe 6 to 8 months, more questions of myself and my understanding of nutrition for performance. Obviously, when I first started getting into CrossFit and learned about zone and obviously paleo, I was all on board, and it was fantastic, and I got very lean, incredibly lean. And it was pretty much a high-fat diet, 45% fats, minimal, maybe like 20% carbs, maybe 15 at points. And then the rest was coming from protein. And in terms of body composition and more traditional health markers such as blood pressure, resting heart rate, stuff like that, it was definitely in good shape for sure. Excuse me, but it didn't lend itself to optimal performance. Having said that, I'm still not of the agreement that fueling with carbohydrates before and during, and depending how long the event is, during right, the workout is the right thing to do. I've seen a lot of studies of these 24-hour marathons where people are running like 100 miles or 100 kilometers. And the athletes that would normally fill up on carbohydrates before, like pastas, bananas, rice, and pizzas, and all this stuff, like every 3 miles to last them through that 24-hour race, as opposed to athletes that are competing, and competing is the word, they're keeping the times very, very much the same. They're very competitive on pre-workout of nuts and seeds, high protein, high fats, and maybe something similar halfway through. And obviously they're able to stay stable in terms of their blood sugar levels and their performance, because they haven't got these insulin spikes going up and down all the way through, leading to like lethargy and then peaks in performance, and just this constant change, which is ultimately going to lead to adrenal fatigue over the long term if you're not recovering properly from it, and you've got a lot of other factors going on in the body as well. It's just a little too much stress for the body. So I'm still on the fence somewhere between like carbohydrates for performance. Yes, it definitely helps. can you still perform well on a more like Paleolithic style diet? Yes, I think there's a happy medium, and I think ultimately in the big picture we're still relatively young in terms of the research that's coming out on that. Like definitely in the last 5 to 10 years, studies have shown benefits to both. But I think there's still a long way to go in determining which is best for sporting performance whilst maintaining good all-round health markers. As you see in the pinnacle of any sport at the top level, someone who's great at a sport isn't necessarily healthy in their lifestyle. Right. For example, extreme powerlifters, marathon runners, opposite ends of the spectrum. One's incredibly strong, one's incredibly good at their endurance abilities, but their health markers still might, for both, might be detrimental. So I think that there's a long way to go in understanding that. And certainly for me as well, I need to study because I still haven't come down on a decision onto where I stand with it yet.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think it also comes back to how we're defining some of these terms, but generally I do agree that health and fitness are maybe not the same thing. And we can kind of get lost in thinking that, if I just continue to pursue getting fitter, that implies I'm getting healthier. And definitely with, as far as adrenal issues go, I think there's a lot of CrossFitters that maybe on the surface look very healthy because of their fitness capacity and their ability to have adapted to do this thing. But under the hood, things could be very detrimental and stressful to the body that ultimately doesn't actually reveal itself as healthy. And I think that can be hard for people really bought in with the community to understand those nuances and potentially trade-offs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had it myself, adrenal fatigue in 2014, I want to say, 2013, 2014. Suffered from adrenal fatigue after diving full on into CrossFit, eating this paleo lifestyle, just wasn't getting enough rest, mainly. Yeah. To recover, and then also the nutrients to support that level of exercise. And again, on the surface, like within the gym, was doing pretty well, was always top 3 in terms of the daily workouts, did all right in the CrossFit Open, had a 6-pack, great, life is good, but then couldn't understand why there was like other things, like trouble with my like sleep pattern and this sort of stuff. And then actually followed some of Dr. Kirk Parsley's research on obviously supplementation to assist with like sleeping and stuff like that, and then kind of went down the rabbit hole of adrenal fatigue and actually contacted him and sent him my results that I'd had done, and he was shocked that I was even able to get out of bed in the morning with my cortisol levels flatlining as they were.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was like off the charts bad.
Yeah.
Like literally was just flatlining, whereas the reference range, I forget what the reference range was, but I wasn't even close to it. So yeah, it was really interesting having been through that personally. But then that's also helped me as a coach to spot those signs of adrenal fatigue in other athletes as well, which is beneficial.
Totally. Having been there yourself. Yeah, and I think just to reiterate the point, it's definitely misleading, this manner in which a lot of people can appear really capable in the gym, and that doesn't necessarily reflect positive health. And oftentimes I think we are led to believe that, you can, if numbers are improving in the gym, then that means, health is improving. And then on the contrary, right? Like if your numbers aren't improving, maybe that means that's an indicator that you need to sort of take a closer look at your health. Maybe you need to get some biomarkers, but it's not necessarily as positively correlated.
Absolutely, yeah. Just as we said, like with my diving more into powerlifting, my powerlifting total, as it is the combination of the squat, bench, deadlift, went up 120 pounds over the period of maybe 3 to 4 months, whilst my resting heart rate and VO2 max both went the other way. They both obviously dropped off. Again, a slight gain in body fat, just training for different things. Right. And it's not like I was intentionally trying to gain weight. I didn't change my diet necessarily, not dramatically. Just in terms of, different output, definitely made a difference to those health markers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, in general, I mean, because as far as CrossFit goes, there's this mentality of, like 5 days a week, you should be in here working out, and on your active recovery, like, let's row for an hour. And, and like humans, I think we're not designed to work that hard for that long, especially not when we are sitting on our butts for 14 hours a day. Like that 1 hour, 90 minutes of intense exercise is too much when the rest of the day you're doing nothing.
Yeah. And I don't know where that came from within CrossFit. It came from the sport of fitness. Not that I've got anything against the CrossFit Games. They're definitely in their place. But I feel like in its filtration down through the system, a lot of gym owners, a lot of head coaches misinterpret what that should look like for their athletes. And then probably also give in to somewhat the demand from the people that walk in the door and say, hey, I want to go to the regionals next year. Hey, I want to do what those guys do on ESPN. And instead of the coach saying, actually, that's not right for you and here's why, they want to, and not necessarily wrongly, I can understand their position, they want to give in to the demands of the members because they're the ones paying the money. So they give the consumer what they want. But as you said, as Greg Glassman said, keep workouts short and intense. Every now and then go heavy, every now and then go long. But for the most part, these short, intense workouts are kind of all you need. That around that 8-minute mark is kind of like the golden mark where you see optimal results. And then you can recover for 24 hours. And then in terms of days per week, it might be 3, it might be 6. Everyone's different. I certainly tell people when they first walk in the gym to start with 3 days a week. And if after a few weeks you feel great, then go to 4. But if you come in and you're like, I've seen it on ESPN, it looks great, I want to do 5 days a week, and I want to do 30 minutes of rowing after class, and then can you help me with your Olympic lift on the weekend? It's just too much, and people will get burned out, which is long-term, detrimental to their success, their GPP.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's such a difference that being able to, as a coach, as a gym owner, have this philosophy of trying to have the biggest positive impact for someone over the long term, and therefore that's usually going to require educating and or helping someone understand what they didn't know versus just appealing to their current understanding, like just saying yes, right? It's like someone could be in and just say like, hey, I want a 6-pack. And then you could just be like, all right, great. I'll meet you here every Wednesday and I'll watch you as you do sit-ups, and not really even explain how most of the 6-pack is going to be built based on nutrition, but rather just meet them with their current understanding and not trying to advance that and build something that is much more robust for you as the coach and for that client that is actually getting something out of it that they can then use.
There's a really good book written by Simon Sinek. He's written a couple of great ones. The first one I read was called Start With Why. And he was talking a lot about brands and how to build brand awareness. But I actually found it really, really some similar philosophies in terms of how to go through life, and then also specifically to a fitness brand. And I read this as a personal trainer in London. And as the book's title suggests, Start With Why, he would always question why people want to do what they do, their motives for it.
Right.
And he used commercials as an example. I'm going to name drop a whole bunch of products here, but that's fine. He said, with a car commercial, you'll see the car and it'll start with what? This is the BMW such and such. What it does this many miles to the gallon, 100 miles per hour. Great. Why you should buy it? Oh, it's on sale. $25,000. Excellent. Whereas if you look at the opposite of that, an Apple commercial, you see a girl running down the beach with her hair blowing behind her and there's palm trees and it looks sunny. That's the emotional connection. They haven't told you what the product is. Most times you don't even see the product until the very end. This is the why. I want to feel like that. That's a why. That's your emotional connection. And then they'll go into, after the why, the how. This is how you can achieve it. You get one of these items and you go for a run. Well, what is one of these items? And then they deliver the what at the end, the iPad mini. Done. It's quickly on the screen, iPad mini, $99, bang. And it's that's all you need to see. Exactly, right? Sign me up. Start With Why was a really good book and a really good read for me in terms of educating. And I actually reduced the number of clients I had nearly by half, and just concentrated on doing better quality work with the clients that understood that they needed the education and wanted to work with me instead of going against the grain with 100 clients. Like working with the 50 clients that wanted to push in the same direction I did was so much more beneficial, more rewarding, less stressful, freed up way more time, and actually delivered better quality of work. And then if in turn you want to improve that, then if you're delivering greater quality of work, then potentially you can ask for a greater price, so you're not even financially losing out there as well.
Right.
So yeah, start with why was fantastic. That really helped me a lot.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like, I didn't even know that you were familiar with that, let alone that had such a positive impact. And this book has come up multiple times on the podcast from other guests. And
should be the subtitle of our podcast at this point.
And it just goes to show like that what we're organically creating and the people that we're attracted to, that it's apparent that there's this kind of same thing in the water. There's this deeper attraction to something bigger than the lowest common denominator or the easiest way to get the job done.
For sure.
So we'll transition into a little more rapid fire as we come near the end of the hour. Actually, we'll start with this, which wasn't considered as a rapid fire, but we'll rope it in. I'm curious what movement methodologies and/or teachers or coaches have had the biggest impact on your personal and professional experience.
I would say definitely the powerlifting coaches Mark Bell and Mike. They don't work together anymore, but yeah, seeing that seminar and hearing them talk about strength progressions and how to achieve them, instead of going into detail on like reps and percentages, they would like, on this day move a pretty heavy weight for a few, and on this day move a light weight for several. Like no paralysis by analysis, keep it simple.
Yeah.
So that, and then Ido Portal as well, just the general movement and seeing the work he's doing with a lot of UFC fights and stuff is really cool. Still keep a track on that. And as we said, it's not necessarily exercise, it's movement. So that's pretty beneficial as well.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good combo, like on both ends of the spectrum for sure.
Right.
What's a favorite coaching memory?
I think definitely teaching the CrossFit kids every week is pretty fun, especially throughout the Open. I get them to do scaled versions of the Open workouts, which is super fun. Whether it be, very light med ball cleans with like a 3 or 4 pound ball or something. So that's always fun. And then just this past week, actually seeing one of our members doing a scaled Open workout, and just how far she got through the workout, through careful pacing and having the whole community there around her. That's the first time in a while that I've experienced like a Friday Night Lights, everyone getting up and after it kind of supportive community. And it felt really special to be like part of that and to be, I guess, part of that growth as well. Like it's one thing being in the gym and seeing that, and then to put the hard work into the gym and then see it come together like that is kind of special, just to take a step back and see everyone around enjoying themselves and having this feeling and this shared passion. It's cool to be a part of. It's cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. As a coach, what gives you the biggest payoff? And then subsequently, what worries you the most?
Seeing people hitting PRs, as primal as that sounds, as basic as that sounds. Just seeing people improve in their lifts or their workout times. Obviously measured over time. I repeat quite a few workouts in the programming. So seeing people, smash through those barriers and seeing the excitement that they get from it definitely excites me. What was the second part? What fears do I have or worries me?
Yeah, what worries you?
Stagnation, not like progressing, both personally and physically. I find, I've got a real fear of not progressing in terms of my education and my physical fitness and the environment around me as well, progressing people around me and the situations that I'm within.
Right. What is your biggest coaching pet peeve?
Expand on that a bit, in terms of like coaches in general, or in terms of like for myself, or?
That's, you decide which one you want to go with.
Biggest coaching pet peeve. If I'm the coach whilst I'm coaching, it would be people not necessarily listening to the advice that you give. Okay, guys, we're keeping these push press light. It should be 50%. It should move fast. And then you see someone like struggling with their first rep, miss the second, and say, guys, we need to bring that weight down. This is supposed to be a light day. We're just supposed to be moving fast. And I'm like, oh, I've got it. I'll do it again. So that's definitely frustrating. And then within like coaching in general, I think there's a really bad standard for people being on their phones or eating during class. So much.
That's coaches
that will just sit at the desk for maybe 3 hours, and then class starts and they'll get the Tupperware out. And I think you could have done that whilst you were sitting.
Oh God, yeah.
So yeah, it's like that class is with you for an hour. Let's just leave everything aside and give them your time for an hour.
Yeah, that's a good visual. Getting that Tupperware out for sure.
Tupperware, yeah.
All right, 2 more here. What element, characteristic, or personality trait do you bring to coaching that people would least expect or may see as odd?
That's a good question. Wow. Character trait. I think the thing that people probably see as odd is that I'm quite reflective on it, so I might not be able to give them the feedback they want straight away, and I'll probably come back to the next class and either haven't done some thought on it or done some research on it and have an answer for either their question, or sometimes they didn't even ask a question, but it'll be an answer specific to their movement. So I think a lot of people, and this isn't just for me, a lot of people expect from all coaches like instant feedback, like, hey, what was wrong with my snatch?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily something you know straight away. And actually, I remember this from the banking days. I'd always say, like, if I don't know the answer, I'll definitely find someone that will, if that makes sense. So if I don't know the answer to something that's happening in a client, I will go away, do the research and find out what could be causing that, or speak to other people who may know, and then either pass that on or put them in touch with that individual directly. So yeah, I'm pretty reflective in terms of my coaching, and it may take a few days for progressions to come forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love just that first part of that, of holding back the impulse or arresting the ego a little bit in a client-coach interaction where it's very easy to want to, again, give them what they want, which is an immediate answer. Same thing with someone walks in the door the first day. Like, hey, I'm interested in this gym. Do you think if I sign up here, I can lose 100 pounds, in a year? And, instead of being like, well, honestly, I'm not sure. I need to know more about you. Most people are be like, oh yeah, come on. This is the place for you, man. So yeah, that's awesome. All right. Lastly, what does it mean to you to practice what you preach?
I think to be like very transparent, because obviously the expression practice what you preach is, people have heard that, it kind of speaks for itself, like do in front of others what you're instructing them to do. But I think be transparent in everything. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you're always right, because no one's perfect, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, practice what you preach. Obviously try and like eat well, try and move well, try and, be kind to others, all this kind of stuff, all this philosophy. But if there are negatives, which there will be, be transparent in it. Like just be fully honest, be upfront. People, now I do more powerlifting, it's a fine balance, because some people, I know this is supposed to be quick fire and I'm giving you a long answer, I'm sorry.
Go for it.
Some people will and have expressed concern that as head coach of a CrossFit gym, I'm not doing as much CrossFit. Understandable, completely. Yeah. And like, there's no excuse. It's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like you need to lead by example. And I'm definitely trying to incorporate more CrossFit. For me personally, I find a good challenge in powerlifting, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. And that's given me a good challenge, and it's keeping me like mentally balanced between obviously coaching and writing the CrossFit programming and workouts, and then doing some powerlifting training. So practice what I preach. Yes, there's a clear example. I'm not actually doing the CrossFit as much as I was CrossFit training, and I'm still encouraging others to do that. So be transparent means, hey, I'm aware of that. I'm sorry, I know I need to step up. I know I need to, join in the CrossFit classes more. And I think in doing that and being honest and being transparent, it allows other people and clients to see that like not everything's perfect. Like, oh, coach is having a bad day. If I come in and I'm having a bad day, maybe he'll let me just sit on the assault bike for 20 minutes because, I just lost my job, or my truck got repossessed, or this, that, or the other, something terrible has happened. Whereas I think a lot of people think that they need to be perfect. Everything needs to be like right all the time. So practice what you preach would be being transparent in everything, even when things aren't well. Let people see and let them know that it's okay. And again, to go on a little bit more, although you're probably trying to shut me up, especially on like social media these days. I heard it before. Someone said, is nothing I coined, not a phrase I use, but someone said, People like to put their highlight reel on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yes.
You only see their highlight reel. You don't actually see like the making of and everything that goes on behind the scenes. You see the best of people. And I think it's too easy in this culture and society to think that everyone leads these perfect lives when they don't. So just trying to be transparent is really key, trying to be honest.
Yeah. And I think in doing so, right, you create, you like you said, you give more freedom to the clients to discover themselves and discover what works and what doesn't, and to just be more open to the process versus cheating themselves or lying to themselves because they're trying to uphold to some standard that is not realistic and potentially not fair.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate your in-depth reflections and concern for the details and wanting to go deeper and push others to do the same. So
yes, thank you so much. And where can people find more about you, stay in contact with you?
So yeah, I mainly use Instagram. I'm on there at Coach Dan Roberts on Instagram. And then you can also find contact details on my website, which is barbellinspired.com. So you'll find email address and contact number on there as well, if people want to get in touch, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I mean, you've provided so many great insights, and it's always great, I know, for Jared and I to hear that there are other people out there who start with their why and are just, on this path of trying to be a better coach and not satisfied with, the status quo. So thank you so much. And
thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Good to know there's more people in the tribe.
Yes.
Right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Oh, man. Thanks,
all right,
guys.
till next time.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. If you have enjoyed what you listened to, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. More information on each episode and the podcast in general can be found at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. We'll catch you next time.